During a violent storm in the open ocean, 4 men cling to the remains of their boat after being stranded at sea for 13 hours. Waves slam into them non-stop as they repeat a chant to stay strong, refusing to surrender to exhaustion or fear. Their voices shake, but their determination keeps them going. What they're living through began 1 week earlier, far from the chaos, in sunny Florida. Nick works as a personal trainer at a high-level training facility, where he becomes close friends with 2 NFL players, Marquis and Corey. The workouts are intense, but the atmosphere is playful, filled with jokes and constant trash talk. Despite pushing their bodies to the limit, the 3 men share a strong bond built on trust and laughter. One evening, the group gathers for dinner with their families. The mood is warm and relaxed until Nick's best friend, Will, arrives late. His energy is off, and soon he admits he was just fired from his job. Seeing how crushed he is, the others quickly step in to lift his spirits, inviting him to join their fishing trip scheduled for the following weekend. Early Saturday morning, Will shows up far too early and makes enough noise to force Nick out of bed. Once awake, Will takes over the kitchen, rapidly preparing nearly 40 sandwiches with military-like efficiency. Soon after, the two head out together toward Marquis House, where they finally get their first look at the boat. Although it's technically designed to carry 11 people, both men quietly agree that it looks smaller than expected. Inside Marquis' home, boxes are stacked everywhere as he prepares for a move. He admits he's unhappy about relocating to Oakland, explaining that the ocean is everything to him. The waves calm his mind and feel like home, but his career leaves him no choice. After a heartfelt goodbye with his family, the group heads out together. At the pier, they pause to discuss the weather. There's word of a storm forming, but they believe they'll return long before it reaches them. To protect their phones, they seal them in plastic bags, knowing they won't have signal offshore anyway. Will expresses some concern, but Marquis reassures him that the boat's radio will keep them safe. Hours later, Nick's mother wakes up and turns on the news, only to see reports about the incoming storm. Alarmed, she immediately tries calling Nick, but he never hears his phone. Out at sea, the men are laughing, fishing, and blasting music. They spend several hours fishing in one location before deciding to head farther out, to try their luck elsewhere. 4 hours into the trip, Corey reels in a massive fish, while Will manages to get his line tangled on the boat. Nick starts feeling seasick, but once the nausea fades, he finds himself oddly peaceful. For the first time, he understands why Marquis feels so connected to the ocean, and his thoughts turn philosophical. That calm doesn't last long. Thunder rumbles in the distance, and the sky begins to darken rapidly. Realizing the danger, they decide it's time to head back. Corey tries lifting the anchor, but it only moves briefly before getting stuck. All 4 men pull together, straining against the rope, but the anchor refuses to budge. As the storm closes in, they tie the rope to the boat and Marquis starts the engine. Instantly, the boat tilts under the anchor's weight. He pushes the engine harder, but the boat leans dangerously, taking on water. Still, the anchor doesn't move. Without warning, a massive wave crashes into them, throwing everyone into the ocean. Fighting powerful currents, the men struggle to resurface. When they finally do, they realize the boat has completely flipped over. Battling the waves, they reach it and attempt to turn it upright, but it won't move. They try again from another angle, but nothing works. Will suddenly realizes the anchor could be holding the boat down. Marquis dives underwater to cut the rope while the others hold onto his clothes to keep him close. He rubs the rope against the propeller until it snaps. They attempt to flip the boat again, but it still refuses to turn. 5 hours pass with the men clinging to the overturned vessel. Marquis remembers that life vests are stored inside, but his soaked clothing makes swimming harder. Ignoring Nick's warnings about staying warm, he removes layers and dives inside, opening the hatch. Water floods in, making the boat heavier, and panic spreads. Just in time, Marquis closes the hatch and resurfaces with one vest. Will dives next and retrieves the remaining vests. Marquis then goes back in for the flares. Corey attempts to find food, but visibility is zero, and he returns empty-handed. Suddenly, they spot a ship in the distance. They scream and fire a flare, but the ship sails past without noticing them. Trying to stay sane, the men joke about their situation. Nick then dives with a flare for light and finds the bag containing their phones. They resurface and desperately try calling 911, but there's no signal. Back on land, Nick's wife grows anxious and contacts his mother. Together, they decide it's time to get help. Around the same time, a police officer arrives at the pier, spots an abandoned car and empty trailer, and alerts the Coast Guard. The wives call each other, clinging to hope. Out at sea, another brutal wave knocks the men off the boat. Thanks to their vests, they manage to regroup and climb back on. Marquis begins shivering violently, weakened by the cold. Nick reminds him that they're strong together. For a moment, the rain stops, and they believe the storm has passed. Then a towering wave slams into them, throwing them apart again. Thunder drowns out their voices, and for minutes, they can't see or hear each other. Eventually, Corey spots the boat and climbs on, helping the others locate it. Marquis reveals he cut his leg badly and can barely move. Another wave pulls them underwater, but after a fierce struggle, they make it back onto the boat. By now, they've been lost for 10 hours. Corey tries to motivate everyone, but Marquis grows weak, saying that if he's meant to die, it should be at sea. Nick refuses to accept that and forces him to focus on his family. Marquis begins hallucinating, thinking his daughter is there. Realizing hypothermia is setting in, they huddle around him and light a flare for warmth. After 20 hours at sea, the rain returns. Marquis keeps slipping off the boat. When Will tries to pull him back, Marquis accidentally punches him, sending Will into the water. Nick helps him back up while Corey restrains Marquis, whose mind is unraveling. Eventually, Marquis slips again, and the others struggle to pull him back aboard. At Coast Guard headquarters, staff search for distress signals. The wives call in, reporting the missing men. Captain Timothy upgrades the case from alert to distress and launches aircraft. Visibility is nearly zero, and radar systems are failing. Two wives search through storage and find Marquis' old GPS. Just in time, they provide Timothy with coordinates. Cross-referencing the data, the team discovers a known shipwreck in that area. The wives confirm it's a spot the men talked about often. Aircraft are redirected immediately. Back on the boat, the men collect rainwater by drinking directly from the sky. The waves intensify, and Corey begins feeling overheated, another sign of hypothermia. Will helps him breathe. A wave knocks Marquis into the water. He's too weak to swim. Will is thrown in as well, but manages to climb back and hold Corey steady. Nick dives into the darkness searching for Marquis, but the waves overpower him. Forced to return, the three men scream in grief, realizing Marquis is gone. Corey loses control and shoves Will into the water, but Will fights back and holds him through the breakdown. A Coast Guard aircraft passes overhead. Nick turns on his phone flashlight, and they scream with everything they have. One pilot briefly sees a flash, but the others see nothing. Assuming it was a reflection, they leave. Another wave knocks the men off as the wives are told the search is temporarily called off. They hold hands, trying to stay hopeful. Timothy contacts a ship named Tornado, and its crew begins searching. By morning, only Nick and Will remain. Corey is gone. Will loses hope, believing stronger men didn't survive. They argue about diving for clothes. Suddenly, sharks circle the boat, drawn by the earlier catch. Sandwiches float nearby, but they can't risk entering the water. With nothing to do but wait, they talk. Will brings up faith and eternity. Nick admits he's angry, unable to pray to a god he feels caused this. Will asks him not to give up. Nick hugs him, insisting he hasn't given up on anything. Together, they repeat their chant. News spreads about the missing NFL players. Searches continue, but conditions remain brutal. Nick's mother confronts Timothy, demanding answers. He promises they'll keep trying. Another wave knocks Nick and Will off again. After struggling back, Nick breaks engine cables and suggests tying themselves to the boat. Though risky, it works until an even larger wave hits. They survive, but despair deepens when a plane flies overhead and doesn't see them. After 24 hours, Will dives for food and finds pretzels and a drink. He spots something that looks like land. Despite doubts, they untie themselves and swim toward it. Minutes later, both the boat and the land vanish. Panicked, they lose sight of each other but eventually reunite at the boat. The storm finally clears. Radar is restored. After 30 hours, Will grows quiet, speaking of his funeral and regrets. He spirals, overheats, and tries to jump into the water. Nick holds him with everything he has. But wave after wave tears Will away until one finally takes him for good. Nick is left alone. Search crews continue. Nick's wife leaves him a voicemail filled with love. After 42 hours, exhausted and broken, Nick gives up and lies down, waiting to die. Then, at the last moment, the tornado spots him. A rescue boat is launched. A helicopter lowers a stretcher. Nick is finally pulled from the sea. Crews celebrate. Paramedics rush in, and Timothy calls Nick's family with the news. Some families rejoice. Others mourn. 6 months later, Nick still hears his friend's screams whenever he's near water. This story is based on real events. The search for the other men continued for days, but was eventually called off. They were declared lost at sea. Make sure to subscribe and turn on notifications for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.